said I was down by the Missouri River on the trail taking pictures of some birds, and I saw a incredibly large creature standing on 2 feet with a log in its hand.
Welcome back to Bigfoot Society. In this episode, we talked to Steve Berg, Nebraska-based high strangeness researcher who's uncovered many lost Bigfoot tales. What is it that Steve's uncovered so far? And what exactly is going on in Otoe County, Nebraska? Find out this and more in this week's episode of Bigfoot Society. All right, Bigfoot Society, we have the privilege of talking to Mr. Steve Berg tonight. How's it going, Steve?
Fantastic, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk to you again. I want to talk for a few minutes about how I met you, Steve. And this was last year at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, and I was at my booth just talking to random people about Bigfoot and stuff, which is great. And you swept out of nowhere with like the energy of like Macho Man Randy Savage with like the elbow coming down. I was like, oh my goodness, this guy's amazing. I love him. It's so much fun. And then I was like, man, there's something like familiar about this guy. And then I found out later, like all this stuff, because you are a comedian and actor too, in addition to being all about the high strangeness weird stuff, which is a really cool combination.
Yes, sir.
But I was like, I've seen this guy somewhere before. And like, you've been in stuff like Gentleman Broncos, The Good Place, Bob's Burgers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
What else? You've been in a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, like a lot of, comedy, television. Drunk History is something I worked on a lot. Worked on that quite a bit. And just kind of like a lot of different Comedy Central shows and mostly comedy-based things. A couple dramatic pieces, but mostly comedic acting is my my specialty. I don't know if I would call it specialty or whatever. It's what I do. It's what I get paid for.
Awesome. Hey, that's great. That's great. It pays the bills so you can go out and look for weird stuff. So
that is true, man. It's all about, just financing my weird addiction to looking for strangeness.
I hear that. I hear that. And now you are in Eastern Nebraska area looking for high strangeness, correct?
Right. Yep. I moved back to the Omaha area, about 2 years ago. I lived in LA for 21 years. And then, my folks are getting a little bit older, so I want to be close to them. And, with technology, luckily I can just audition for my basement, fly out there or wherever when I need to work. So I'm Omaha based now, which is great. It feels great to be back here.
Thinking back of all the times you've been involved with films and movies, did they connect to high strangeness events at all? Or did like someone say something you're like, oh, that reminds me of it? Or like anything weird like that ever happen during?
Well, yes, so much. What for first off, like usually, there's a lot of downtime when you're on set. And all I've ever read in my whole life is like this kind of stuff, a lot of UFO stuff, not just like Bigfoot stuff, obviously UFOs, high strangeness, stuff about Arabian mystics from 2,000 years ago, Celtic fairy faith books. I'm deep into it, but coming from a lot of different angles. So yeah, people are always like, what are you reading about? I'm like, oh, I'm reading about the Celtic fairy faith in the, 16th century. They're like, okay, anyway, but then also in 2010, I straight up made a kind of found footage film with my co-director, Devin McGinn, about Skinwalker Ranch. So that was my foray into just like directly dealing with high strangeness. And, it was, some people like it, some people don't. It was a, honest attempt at a very difficult subject to tackle, but it was super fun because I spent like a lot of time researching it, and then we wrote the script and got it financed. And then at the 2 weeks before we started shooting it, the financier was like, you need to make it a found footage movie. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that though, but I'd already cashed the checks, so it was too late. But it was fun. It's really hard to do high strangeness well, I think. Like I feel like a show like Twin Peaks probably handled it better than anything.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
When people ask me like, what should I watch to learn about like weird stuff, I go, or like people are like, oh, is there a book or a documentary about UFOs or Bigfoot that you could point me to? I go, just watch Twin Peaks season 3. That is the best documentary about UFOs you'll ever watch. You know, like it just captures the absurdity so well, I think.
I always like to ask guests, what was it that set you down the road to the high strangeness, to the weirdness, to the Bigfoot? Like, what was it that just set it off in your mind, do you think?
It's a great question. And it's actually something like now I think about, because it's odd. My mom likes to remind me of a story. When she took me to get my first library card, I think I was 4 or 5, fairly young. She was a school teacher, so she was all about reading. And she took me, and I came back with a Billy Meyer. And I don't know if Billy Meyer is this famous UFO hoaxer from Switzerland who took these beautiful hoaxed UFO photos. But I came back with a picture book of a Billy Meyer thing, and it was about UFOs and a book about magic. And so then I remember like getting the Time Life books about like ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, like had every subject, spontaneous human combustion, and just all the kind of Fortean topics that we know and love. And really, I never stopped since then. It's been a driver. I started going to like UFO conferences. My first one was in 5th grade. My mom dropped me off in like Lincoln, Nebraska, back in the day where you just drop a kid off, and I like would meet the luminaries of the UFO world, in the 80s. And so it's like I've just been into this stuff pretty intensely, and like you would think I'd grow out of it, but it really only gets more intense for me.
Who were you rubbing shoulders with in the 80s at a UFO conference when you were in 5th grade? Do you remember anyone?
Oh my God, yes, totally. I remember waiting in line for like an hour to meet Stanton Friedman. Stanton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the OGs of like the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Like kind of the nuts and bolts guy. Nuclear physicist from Stanford. Yeah. He at that time was probably the most. He was like the Elvis of UFOs back in the 80s, because he was the one who would be on like Larry King. He kind of was the media representation of UFOs in the mainstream. And so meeting him was a huge deal. I remember waiting in line, and I didn't buy a book. And he goes, "What? No book?" And I was like, "Oh God, no." But he shook my hand. He was really nice. But I met him, Richard Boylan, who is another kind of a UFO grifter from the 80s. And Linda Moulton Howe was there.
Oh, yeah.
John Keel was there, but at the time I did not know. I don't remember him being there, which is upsetting to me, because he's probably like my, him or Valet are my favorite probably writers of this stuff,
Sometimes you just don't know,
I know.
That's
man.
how life is. Wow.
Yeah. And honestly, like Keel was a little bit too weird. I tried to read a Keel book when I was probably like, I think an early, freshman in high school. And I'm like, this is too weird. I want it to be aliens from another planet. No way. So I remember reading it and like not getting very far through Operation Trojan Horse or whatever it was. But now it's like, I've read it 3 times. So yeah, it's hard to pinpoint it. I'm not like an experiencer, but it was just something, I think, not to get like, talk about taboo topics, but I didn't grow up with any religion. Like I was not raised with religion at all. So sometimes I think I was just a young kid looking for something else. And, I turned to the paranormal. That would be my best guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a really cool story though. With the whole 80s UFO conference. I love that.
Yeah. God, just a kid. Yeah.
That's wild. We were talking before we started recording, and of course, most people, you're listening to the podcast and you're like, I'm here for the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And they're listening and they're like, why is this guy on?
Yeah.
What has he got to know about this? So tell me, do you know anything about Bigfoot in Nebraska? What do we have going on out there?
I am glad you asked. Literally today, I think I messaged you back. I'm not sure if you saw it. You might have been working or something, but this morning when you said like, hey, we're all good for the time, I messaged you that I'm going out to some wildlife management areas in Nebraska. So I have a research partner named John K. I don't know if he wants his name put out there just in case. Great guy, really great guy, super smart, very deeply committed to, investigating this stuff in Nebraska with me. But we went out today to look at some wildlife management areas in a place called Otoe County, Nebraska, which I guess the biggest city would be Nebraska City, but it's kind of a really rural area that butts up against the Missouri River. And it just so happens that this county, Otoe County, in terms of Bigfoot, it's really a lot of sightings going back to the late 1800s.
Oh.
They didn't have the words for it, but they called it the wild man. 7-foot tall wild man covered in fur, grabbing chickens from you can go back into these county newspapers, type in wild man under the keyword search. And I really think all people should do this in the area they live. You'll be shocked at what you find. It's amazing. I did not know a lot of this stuff existed, or that there was a Bigfoot history in Eastern Nebraska. I knew there had been sightings because there's some BFRO sightings. Great. And those are fine. But all the way up from the tippy top of Nebraska, going all the way down that runs along the Missouri River in Eastern Nebraska, there is ongoing stuff. And there's documentation of it going back over 100 years. And it's funny because everyone's like, well, how would, Bigfoot be in Nebraska? And, it's not a forested state. And Eastern Nebraska does have some pretty dense-ish tree line covered riparian forest. But that also, I think, leads to the question is, well, is Bigfoot necessarily a flesh and blood animal? So I mean, I don't know. I don't really, obviously, I don't know anything. You can just have these thought experiments about it. But yes, Nebraska does have a history of Bigfoot. I think it has 15 confirmed, investigated cases from the BFRO website. But a lot of them right now currently are taking place around Macy, Nebraska, which is the Omaha Indian tribe has a large swath of reservation land right next to the Winnebago tribe. And there's two brothers named Barry and Derek Webster.
The Satanga guys.
Yes, exactly. Yes. The red squatching dudes.
Yes.
And I have not been out with them. I'm going out with them this spring for an overnight.
Ooh.
My dude, if you ever want to come, you're probably not that far away. Consider it. I'll hook you up.
We'll talk off air.
Yeah. I am going to go out with them, and they look, a lot of people have gone out with them and had real action, really intense encounters with what we would call Bigfoot. And I think for a long time, they were just experiencing Bigfoot, but now it's turned into, there's a really good researcher in Nebraska named Richard Soule, and he is kind of the Bigfoot guy in Nebraska. And I actually talked to him about 2 weeks ago for about 2 hours, and he was telling me some wild stuff that's been happening currently. And it's not just Bigfoot. It is little stick figure entities, balls of light. Balls of light have been happening, shocker, often associated with Bigfoot encounters.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And they have that. I mean, that is in fact, I spoke with two people who went on expeditions with Barry. And I was like, well, how was it? How was the experience? I'm just curious. And they're like, it was really cool. Everyone was really nice. We didn't experience any, we saw these orbs of light flying around the forest, but we didn't see any Bigfoot, and they were disappointed. I was like, wait, what? You saw orbs of light and you're disappointed?
Wow.
Of course I'd love to see a Bigfoot too, but I don't know. So right now, currently, according to them, and what they're reporting, they're having encounters weekly. With the sea tonga, and the sea tonga is what they call their version of the Bigfoot.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a lot of action happening right there currently. And then in Eastern Nebraska, I've been going out kind of investigating a case that takes place around Douglas, Nebraska. It's a small, tiny village. And this bow hunter had a really dramatic encounter that he was on Sasquatch Chronicles talking about it and some other shows, but it was a really, really dramatic encounter that messed him up. It made him stop hunting for 4 years. It was really intense for him and not a positive experience. He was, I saw something that should not be there. And, he was a bow hunter. And then he took me out to see some structures. And it was the first time in my life, because honestly, I'll be honest, kind of this boots on the ground approach that I've been luckily enough to be able to do the last couple of years is new. I've always been kind of the just academic or, nerdy dude just devouring books or documentaries.
Right. Yeah. In the armchair, just
yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, I've always kind of dreamt about, leading, living that Keel life. And so because of the pandemic, it sort of afforded me some extra time to do that. And I have, and it's just been quite wonderful. But around this area, this bow hunter, and he has had a couple experiences. He has seen a 8-foot tall Bigfoot that was like really dark fur, conical head, really dark fur. It was like black fur. And he said he saw it like in the evening and the eyes were red, but he was just like the feeling of horror and dread not only affected him then, he just started crying. This is like a pretty tough dude because I've gone out with him. And when I went out with him, he had 2 guns on him, which I'm not like a gun guy.
Wow.
I'm not a gun guy at all. I'm a real pussycat. So when I went out there, he the first thing he says, he's like, I have a bad shoulder. Can you help me put on my shoulder harness? And I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, he was strapped up. He took me out there, showed me what he wanted to show me. He's like, I'm leaving now. You can stay if you want, but text me when you get home in case anything happens.
Oh, wow. Like he's like, I'm not staying around here.
Nope. And he's like, I won't go in the morning. He made me, he's like, let's go midday because they won't be, I don't think it'll be out then. He's like, I tend to have action. And the thing is, he's spoken with other deer hunters in the area because they're like a little community. They hunt in this private property farm. It's so rural. It's thousands of acres. My cell phone doesn't work out there. It's very uncomfortable out there, very scary. And he, has spoken with other hunters who have seen this thing, and they're all like really scared about it. It's none of them are like, man, it's really cool. I saw a Bigfoot.
Yeah, high fives.
No, exactly right. Like I think maybe you and I might be like that, or at least we think we'd be like that.
We would be like that.
I think so, bro. I think so, man. We'd be cool. But all of these guys, he says it's like ruin. It's not a positive thing. And he, you can probably find him interviewed. And I highly recommend listening to his account because it is definitely terrifying. And what I will say is when he took me to this area, showed me these structures, I'm not really sure how they were made. There were some giant logs and trees, X's out there. He showed me orbs. He showed me orbs of light on his trail cam. And I was like, did he just do this for me? Did he get some buddies together with pulleys and stuff and pull giant logs? And I'm like, I kind of doubt it because he's not trying to profit. I don't think he'd go to the trouble to fool one person because I'm the only person he's ever shown this stuff to.
And
so
it's not like, like you're an investigator.
Yeah.
It's not like you're a guy from the news or you're a famous author or like this guy has nothing to prove by lying to you, right?
And
it doesn't make sense.
You're right. And I had to beg him because the first thing he did, we talked and he's like, I'll tell you where it is, the general area, but it's very hard to find. I'm like, okay. And he did kind of tell me the general area. And I went back and I'm like, man, I didn't know it was like, everything looks the same. It was really, And so finally I kind of wore him down, but he did look me up because, you look people up to make sure they're not criminals or whatever. And he's like, oh, you're a comedy guy. You're going to you're trying to sandbag me, doing a guy. And I was like, man, no. So then that threw me 3 months behind. But eventually I broke him down. I was like, man, I swear to God, I'm sincere. I will not bring a camera or I'm not trying to, make you look like a fool. And he took me out there, but for a very short time. And I was very startled by the pictures. I'll send you some later. I'll have to get them off a hard drive. But it's
awesome.
It really was it was troubling because when he left me out there, he's like, you can stay here as long as you want. I told the farmer that you'll be on here. And then just when you get home, text me. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fair, man. And he left and I started walking for about 1 minute and I was like, maybe not. I got my car and took off. I was
you freaked out. Yeah.
I freaked out, dude. I'll be honest. And and I'm not I go looking for this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With all this high strangeness stuff, since I was a child, I was the guy getting my friends together in high school. Let's drive out to this cemetery, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I've been actively trying to have an encounter with anything weird. But when given the real opportunity where after hearing his story, I was like, not a chance I'm going to be here by myself.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'd love to show you sometime. If you ever, want to take a little Eastern Nebraska high strangeness, I would give you a fun tour guide day.
That'd be wild. That'd be wild, man. How did you get how'd you get introduced to this dude, to Sean?
Well, I mean, I'm prone to high strangeness rabbit holes. And, I've been looking very deeply at the history of Nebraska. And somewhere along the line, I think it was maybe, it might have been the Sasquatch Chronicles forum. I saw this guy and he was talking about, I put in like keyword Nebraska. He came up, listened to the episode, and immediately I got in contact with him. I found him. I think it was maybe on Facebook, messaged him, and then, it's kind of off to the races. But yeah, I mean, I'm every other day I'm like Googling Nebraska Bigfoot, see if anything new comes up. And,
Wow. Have you been to the Nebraska Bigfoot Museum yet?
Oh yeah. It's great, man.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's really fun. And they have actually next month is the Nebraska Bigfoot Convention, which is very fun. Jeremiah, you've got to come sometime.
I know, but it's like it's Western Nebraska, right?
It's like, so it's in Hastings, which is about 70 miles from Omaha.
Okay.
I mean, it's, I don't know where you are, where you're like Central Iowa or something like that.
I'm like just west of West Des Moines. Well, I'm just west of Van Meter. That'll tell you. Yeah.
So yeah, you're probably two-ish hours away from me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would be probably a 4-hour drive, but well worth it. You get yourself a night at the hotel, get yourself a steak and then, whatever, and you enjoy. Although last year I was there and there was a lot of Nephilim talk. And I was like, okay, and I'm like, all right, I respect it.
That's cool. Six-finger high five.
There was a lot. I had like people coming in and like, it's the Nephilim, right? And I'm like,
just coming up to you out of nowhere. There's
just
like not high, but hey, Nephilim, that's wild, man.
Yeah, it was. Wow. I'll listen to everybody. I'm not there to debate. I'm there to absorb as much information and just the vibe of the whole situation. I love like small town festivals, conferences. That's kind of what I live for. I've been to a lot of like big ones in Vegas and LA, and honestly, they're so impersonal. There's no vibe, Those big convention centers just have no. I mean, they're fun. It's a different experience, but like that's why I love Van Meter. It's just that is like a perfect conference.
It's great.
And they run it really well. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I am privileged to be part of the crew now. To be part of the committee, it's such a cool experience. So I'm a fan of being on that.
Well, let me, if you don't mind me giving you a nice little delicious compliment. I was unable to hear your full lecture, but I heard it. I guess they taped some of them, or I heard an audio version of the lecture you gave at the Van Meter last year.
I taped it and I put it on the podcast.
That's where I heard it. Okay, I heard it on your. Yeah. It was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
You got that is the kind of like research and work that I love, because that is the stuff we can do. We can't make up encounters, there's only so much stuff, but like investigating the subculture of a very small culture.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Is really fun, but also really important. Like, I think that is such a great lecture. I hope you give it again, because lectures shouldn't be one and done, in my opinion. That is such a good lecture. I feel like I'm going to have a conference in Omaha just so I can invite you to come speak. Do that again.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm really like the whole Douglas thing. That's Eastern Nebraska?
It is. So, it's literally a village of, I think, 110 people. And then it's just south of that. So, I mean, when I say it's in the middle of nowhere, it's about as desolate as like the lower 48 get. Like there's large swaths of Nebraska, probably like Iowa and other Midwest states, where there's just nothing around. But there's tributaries going all through there. It's close to the Missouri River. There's like 3 creeks. There's Logan Creek, Skull Creek, and the Little Nemaha that all grow through there. So there's a lot of water sources. It's one of the biggest areas for deer hunting. But yeah, it's the closest like town would be Palmyra, which it's
Okay. I know Palmyra. Yep.
Yeah, it's south of Lincoln. Just it's probably 30 minutes away from.
Midwest listeners are gonna love this episode. They're gonna be like, "This is so regional. I love it,
dude." Reach out to me. I mean, I am just trying to share this information. I'm not a guy who's like, I'm keeping this stuff secret. I don't believe in that. Nice. Like that's not what I'm about, man. Because I feel like if I share stuff, I'll get stuff back. So.
And you're saying that hunters are having like constant encounters with something in this area, or?
Well, no, I shouldn't say constant.
Okay.
Sean was telling me that these three hunters he knows, or two guys he knows, there was three guys who had this encounter. All three of them together saw the same thing, and it was a Bigfoot running. And he didn't describe what it looked like if it was dark, or maybe he didn't. I just don't remember it. But yeah. So, and they had it, kind of in the same area, and maybe like a mile away. It wasn't like the exact same little forest area.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
that's wild stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so you and your research partner, John.
Yes.
You guys are actually going out yourselves and doing some Bigfoot research into areas.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So our it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, how do you study UFO? If you want to be like a boots on the ground investigator, right? You have to say, it's like, how do you want to study UFOs as a boots on the ground investigator? How do you want to study cryptids? It's like, I guess you go to the places where people have reported them, right? So that's really been our approach. I have some great resources. A guy named Ray Boucher, who's just kind of like the Fortean historian of Nebraska. He's kind of he was the protagonist in Nick Redfern's book, Final Events. He's a pretty big deal. He was the one who kind of brought Rendlesham to light in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
But he's a wonderful researcher. And he's the one who really, when I moved here, he was so nice enough saying, like, if I was your age and I want to do boots on the ground investigation, go to Otoe County. There is everything there. John Keel, and here's the thing, Ray was a 15-year-old boy. And in the mid 60s, and more precisely, the exact same time all the stuff was happening in Point Pleasant, this area of Otoe County was having the same stuff. Flying humanoid encounters, structured UFO craft landings, a lot of Bigfoot sightings, 2 Bigfoot encounters where one teenager was thrown in a ditch, one girl was scratched by a large Bigfoot type creature.
Wow.
I mean, everything was happening. It was not just Bigfoot. It was like a lot of black cat sightings. Orbs of light over the Missouri River, like every night. So much so that the people in Nebraska City would go onto this place called Riverview Drive on a big hill and watch the lights like it was normal. It's like, hey, let's go watch the flying orbs of light tonight. And it was just for a 2-year period. And Ray Boucher, when he was 15, he had like a pen pal relationship with John Keel, because I think John Keel, here's this precocious kid who's like, and he was writing with Ivan T. Sanderson and a lot of other people, but him and Keel had a good bond, so much that they were talking on the phone, and he was describing to John Keel what is happening with all this stuff. And he was telling him that it happened in this certain area called Minersville. It's now a ghost town, but it's right on the Missouri River. There's a power plant. It has geographically, it's just like Point Pleasant. There was also a tragedy that happened there, just like the Silver Bridge. So John Keel told Ray, he goes, well, I've kind of developed this new term, and it's called a window area. And I think you have one there. And so, and that's what, he termed Point Pleasant, an area where the veil is thin between reality. And I know this is maybe getting a little woo-woo out there in terms of Bigfoot stuff, but Bigfoot was happening during this time period where there was a lot of UFO action and just a lot of high strangeness.
You've mentioned a few times that there's certain areas where there's concentrations. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you specifically one more time, I guess.
Please.
Have you found that you're looking at all these Bigfoot sightings and reports all the way back to the 1800s. Is there a place or a region in Eastern Nebraska that keeps coming up? Or like you have the pins on the map and it's like, oh, I've got the triangle, or like something like that.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was just talking about. Otoe County, Nebraska. You can look it up. And you can Google Earth it, and it'll have the little highlighted area. And that is, what I'm saying is not. I mean, definitely this is where I have found the most Bigfoot sightings historically and somewhat in the modern times. Now, I think the whole Macy area where the Omaha Reservation is where I'm hearing most of the reports, like right now in 2023. But there's something about Otoe County that really deserves a microscope on, because it's the breadth of how this phenomenon is manifesting itself in all different ways, and I'm not trying to like espouse my personal beliefs on what Bigfoot is, but like I'm just saying like it's not just Bigfoot people are encountering here. It's kind of all the stuff, and a lot of the way Bigfoot behaves, in terms of like when people are having experiences they're getting rocks thrown at them. They're getting whooped at. And, a lot of that sounds like poltergeist activity to me. When people describe poltergeist activity, it's like they're getting pushed by an invisible force or rocks thrown at them or a feeling of like a nauseating feeling, So, I mean, like, I'm not saying, maybe there's something about a flesh and blood Bigfoot that has kind of these infrared sound things that, zap people and make them feel weird. Maybe that might be the thing. I sort of tend to think of everything as different manifestations of potentially the same source. Maybe. And, ask me next month, I'll change my mind. But like, that's the idea I'm sort of interested in now, because it just seems there's a lot of patterns between, UFOs, ghosts, and Bigfoot, for instance, that I'm just like, it's hard to deny the similarities when people have these encounters, in my opinion.
Have you found that, sometimes some places there's similar things between the reports, like, it was a Bigfoot that was white, or it had a yellow part of the fur on its head. Have you found anything like that sets the Bigfoot in your part of Nebraska apart from a report that you might read from British Columbia or California or anything like that?
That's a great question. I find that in terms of like I feel like the ones in the Pacific Northwest are a lot of like really kind of reddish brown hair. Yes. And the ones that I hear about here seem to be darker fur. And I've never really thought about that actually as a pattern, but I'm glad you mentioned that. But there was one of my favorite sightings was in Shatter, Nebraska, like, about 15 years ago. It's by a college professor who saw like an 8-foot tall, whitish gray creature.
Oh.
I thought that was pretty cool. And up in northern Nebraska, I have never read the accounts, but I have heard that there is a white Bigfoot that people have seen, or big feet, or a Bigfoot-like creature, But in terms, I'm finding actually quite a bit of varieties. And, people describe different, some of these creatures have like really red eye shine, in the night. Some don't. And some have that real conical head, and some people don't report the conical head. So it is kind of, I haven't found like a pattern in terms of like we're seeing one kind or two kinds. And, I also think there's kind of like, it's a hard thing to report because the amount of adrenaline and endorphins, I mean, this is like, you are seeing something that should not exist, I guess. And so it must be so ontologically discombobulating that like, it would be hard to gather in a real accurate read. And I believe people's accounts when they're talking about this stuff. Obviously, I know there's something to it. But like, I don't think I'd be able to accurately describe a Bigfoot if I saw it because I'd be in so much shock. I'd be like, I had a lot of fur and it was scary. I don't know.
That's a great point. Like how much you must have to be able to just calm yourself down.
Yeah.
And like be almost a trained observer, like a military dude, in order to get these. I don't know how these guys are able to, get the description. Because like you, I'd probably be freaked out.
I'd be freaked out, and I would also be like, I think like in just such a state, almost like it seems like when I imagine, like, because I've never had like that confirmation experience of anything high strange. I've had some like weird things happen, but like nothing where I couldn't sort of rule out or just go, I don't know. But I feel like if I had that confirmation experience of any kind with high strangeness, it would be such a shock because it would be so unreal and otherworldly, So, I mean, I want it, obviously. I was out today from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. at wildlife management places in Otoe County looking for stuff.
What are you taking out there in order to be prepared in case you actually encounter something?
Right. I mean, John and I sort of have the same-ish, I mean, probably not identical, but like the same-ish, like kind of a, philosophy when it comes to this. I don't like feel so scared. I'm more scared of humans. Like to me, it's how do I prepare myself for some weird human when I go out, in the rural areas? To be honest, I'm not scared of the phenomenon like that. So no, I don't carry a gun. I don't carry a club. I bring a cell phone, and a GoPro and a deck of tarot cards for some inspiration. And I usually, I sort of try to treat it sometimes like you're making a fairy altar. And sometimes I'll take a little, piece of bread off my turkey sandwich and sprinkle it out for the spirit elves of the forest. And I'm open to it all. When I'm going out there, like I'm going out to these places because that is the one thing that's wonderful about cryptids and Bigfoot, is that it is boots on the ground research that I feel like, sure, the chances are low, but someone did see something here. If you believe the anecdotal account that you're going out to this location based on that. So when I hear these stories, it's not like I'm like, I don't know. I didn't get proof that this person had a Bigfoot encounter, but I believe enough that they believe the story. And therefore it's enough for me to spend the day checking it out. So I prepare myself. I go in there, I go in there with a real positive attitude, like, hey, man, I'm a dude in my 40s who just gets to be out in nature. And it's a great way to like hike and be outdoors, but you have like a purpose, So I guess, I'm looking for prints. I'm looking for structures. And today, John and I, we kept on finding giant Y-shaped branches that looked like they were tucked up in the nooks of trees. Some we kind of like, oh, actually, that looks like a tree break. Yeah, I see where that tree fell down. But we took a lot of pictures today. We were kind of like, wow, this kind of this is definitely a worthwhile trip. We're going to go back there for sure. Yeah, and I'll tell people, it was the Triple Creek Wildlife Management Area right south of Palmyra, if people want to check it out. And there has been a handful of reported Bigfoot encounters in the last 10 years that have occurred there. So go there and let me know what you find.
Dude, good for you for being the dude who's like, hey, here's the keys to the kingdom. Go look for yourself. Like, that's amazing, man. Dude.
I think it's a community effort, though. Yeah. I would love to be able to tell people exactly where I had something, right. Why keep it to yourself? It just doesn't make any sense,
Totally got it. Have you found there's like a ultimate resource book for Bigfoot info in Nebraska, or does that not exist yet?
No, so in like the 80s and 90s, there was a dude named guy named Ray Boucher, who I mentioned earlier, who had kind of hit me to this area. Really, I credit him with it. And then a guy named Scott Colburn and a guy named Dale Bacon. And then the 80s and 90s, they started the Fortean Research Center of Nebraska. And honestly, cops were getting so many calls about UFOs, Bigfoot encounters on farm fields, that they didn't have time or the bandwidth to go out to this old lady's house where she said, a Bigfoot was taking apples from the orchard. So they would call these guys almost like X-Files and say, all right, we got a Bigfoot encounter, it'd be like 1987. And they go, all right, we'll go check it out. So they were doing this for like 15 years. But anyways, they had this kind of, what do we call it? An encyclopedia of Nebraska Fortean research. All the Nebraska stuff that they collected, they put in this big volume. It's by Ray Boucher put together. You can find it on Amazon. It's kind of a coffee table book. And to me, that's like the Nebraska High Strange Bible. Yeah. I have like the pages memorized. It goes from everything to, poltergeist, ghost, tons of UFO stuff, tons of Bigfoot stuff, lots of alien black cats, and, just great stuff. Kangaroo sightings, like all the good stuff. Wow. So yeah, that is a resource I recommend if you're, a lonely, Fortean researcher in Nebraska. You need this book.
You absolutely. I'm going to have that book in the show notes, and you can hit that link and check it out.
Please
check it out right after this.
Yeah,
I always like talking to researchers where you can tell that they've taken the time to look up articles. What have you found is the best way to find these old articles that might not be on the internet, or you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. If you just stick to the Google search of any state, I guess, it depends on what state. I'll speak for Nebraska, and maybe you found this in Iowa. You'll find stuff, obviously, but it is pretty limited, man. It really is pretty limited, surprisingly. But what I have found in the state of Nebraska, they have all the library systems in every county in Nebraska are linked up. and you can go on the, it's like Nebraska Public Library. I cannot remember the name of it. It would be easy to find, but you can go to any county, like Otoe County. This is how I found a lot of my research. And I went to libraries and literally spent days at libraries, going through old records, which I found stuff. But I have a couple. Here, I'll give you my like 3-pronged approach to finding old historical.
Sweet.
Right. Okay. So one is the first step you want to do is if your state is lucky enough to have these county historical records of all the newspapers from all the little towns and stuff like that, go there. And within there, you can keyword search. And if you type in Bigfoot, you'll see stuff from the 60s on. But if you type in Wildman, hairy Wildman, and just play around with different keyword searches, oh my God. I mean, I was like, my face like turned white. I almost felt like I was getting sick because I'm like, oh, what? There's Bigfoot reports in like 1891? Like what is happening? And
wow.
It really was truly shocking, because I did not expect to find that. And Ray was like, he's like, do some legwork. I'm telling you, you will find stuff because I have. And he's like, if you look at it. And so I did. And I've also, I will call up historians. This is another approach I have. I will call up a county historian. Almost every county in Nebraska has a historian, or if it's a big enough town, like Nebraska City has their own historian. But I met a historian at the library. I brought her a nice scone and a latte, and we sat down all day. And I think because I brought her the pastry and the coffee, she was so tickled by that. She bent over backwards for me and was just bringing out stuff. She's like, you want to photocopy all this? I'm like, oh my God. And I spent like $40 on like making photocopies. Yeah, I have like files in my closet over here. I mean, it's amazing to me. That is like just like finding treasure. So, like librarians have been an amazing resource. I had this librarian in Table Rock, Nebraska. It's a town of like 1,500. But this lady every once in a while emails. She's like, look what I found. There was a haunting in this house that 3 different people lived in this house and kept on moving out because they were scared of the ghost. I'm like, thank you, and I'll send her like a gift card or something like that, but like I kind of try to treat them really nicely because the amount of stuff they send me, and then they get excited. A lot of these historians, I think, are bored, dude. And like when you call them, say like, hey, I always present myself as, hey, I'm like, working on a project for, and I am sort of like writing a collection of these stories, but I'm working on a project of Nebraska folklore, urban legends, UFOs, paranormal, this nag, and and then I convince them that I'm not a crazy person. And then it's been rare where I haven't had one of these librarians or historians really help me out. And then you kind of put a bug in them, and then all of a sudden they're like, I think a lot of times they're sitting at the desk, Windexing like the computer monitors, and they would rather librarians. They love what they do. So they love research. They love books. They are willing to help. You really have to try. It will work. And then another approach I have is honestly, and this is hilarious, I will cold call park rangers. I will cold call.
What?
Oh yeah. I'm not joking.
No
I probably cold called nearly every state park in Nebraska. And I've had a couple amazing bites. A lot of people are just like, no, whatever. Most of the people are just shoot me down pretty quick. But 2, like one Fontenelle Forest it's actually not far from Omaha. It's in Bellevue, which is like 20 minutes from where I live.
Sure, yeah.
In the late summer, and this is like a park. Omaha's like 1 million people. So it's not like it's a city, so like Bellevue is close to Omaha, which is, close to the downtown Omaha, which is kind of a small Midwest metropolis. And this guy who's a lawyer, he was a bird watcher and a bird photographer. And he would come to this Fontenelle Forest. You can look it up, Fontenelle Forest, folks. And there's been a couple in the 70s. There was 2 pretty well BFRO cases that happened right around there. So it's not a huge surprise. But this guy came in shaken. And he was like a retired guy, 75 years old. Came to the front desk and he said, I was down by the Missouri River on the trail taking pictures of some birds, and I saw a incredibly large creature standing on 2 feet with a log in its hand.
Oh.
And I ran, and he ran back. And this guy would come for the last 20 years. He's been there like weekly, even the winter. and like he sells his photographs, and he's just kind of this nice, sweet old man. He came in there, he was nearly in tears and said, I will never come back here again. But you guys need to know what I saw. He left, and he has not been back since.
So you only got that story because you called called the park ranger.
And what I said is like,
wow,
hey, I'm a researcher of folklore, and I know back in 1978 and in 2002 there were these Bigfoot encounters, and I don't sound super serious. I kind of sound kind of light and fun, like, oh, isn't that fun? Anyways, I'm researching. Is there any other story? She's like, well, a month ago, and then it's amazing. She's like, I also have a ghost story if you want to hear it. And I go, I'd love to hear it. And I gave her my email. She's like, I'll write it out. It'll be better. But she told me about a ghost that she had in her house when she lived in Minnesota as a kid. And so people want to talk about this stuff. It's unbelievable. And I feel like most people kind of like, when I tell people this, they're like, man, how do you have and it's not courage, or just how do you have the stupidity to actually take the time to do this stuff? And I'm just like, I don't think you know until you try. If someone called my work and asked me if the building was haunted and I knew it was, I would love to tell them about it. So I think it's one of these things where all this folklore, all this stuff to me is folklore until it isn't, and so it's just a convenient way, basket to put everything in. And some people, when I say folklore, think I'm diminishing the validity of this stuff. I am not. Obviously, I was out there today looking for stuff. But all this stuff I find is so important to keep the history, the urban legends, the mythology of these rural communities in every state, because it really has an impact on who we are as a society. Because whether we know it or not, we are practicing magic every day. We are influenced by the past in ways we don't even know. And a lot of times it's folklore. I mean, there's not a building in Omaha that has a 13th floor. That's superstition. That's magic,
Wow.
Before people play a football game, what do? They walk out in the field at the same time. They flip a coin. I mean, that's a magic ritual, So all this stuff plays a very big role in our lives. And I feel like maybe not everyone recognizes that, but it's kind of fun because it's a way to re-enchant the world again, So I think Bigfoot is one of those things that is even though they have a version of Bigfoot, I think it's been seen on every continent, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's kind of it's a global phenomenon.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, in one way or another, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but there's this American Bigfoot. It's almost like a cowboy cryptid. It's kind of there's something very American about Bigfoot. And I know and the versions in other countries, I'm not diminishing them, but I feel like the way we perceive Bigfoot, the way we talk about it as Americans is, I bet, very different than they do in other cultures. Yeah. So the cultural lens of where you are location wise, and how the society you're around behaves, it will affect how people look at UFOs or Bigfoot and stuff like that. I think it really does play a huge part. And that's why I think, folklore is, and all these topics are not just fun, but also very important to the human story.
Extremely important. I agree 100% for sure. Man, this has gotten me jazzed up, dude. That's some of the best advice that I have gotten on the podcast for how to research. That's amazing, Steve. That's some really, really good advice.
Yeah, well, it's truly of a lack of not knowing what to do, and I was just like, I don't know. I guess this is, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just call state parks. but it's, and also I call so any place that has printed a news story about high strangeness, UFOs, ghosts, or Bigfoot that happened locally, I always call the reporter who wrote the story or email them. If they're still alive, a lot of times I've reached out and the person had passed on by then, but I've gotten some incredible stories and incredible information and new leads on where to look by calling reporters, and they love to talk about it. And a lot of them kind of talk look, I reported about this. I don't believe it. And they're kind of I'm like, whatever. I don't care if you believe it. Just give me the information.
Yeah. Oh,
so man, I have a thick skin with this stuff.
Dude, Steve, you got to come out with a book someday about Nebraska.
I want to, yeah.
High strange. It would be amazing.
Yeah, I kind of started writing a book about Nebraska, but I think what I want to do is write a book about Otoe County, because it's just...
Yeah, totally.
It's enough, it really is. I
Yep.
have like more than enough. But I feel like right now I'm still like in that research process where I'm not done researching. And there's more work to be done. So yeah, but I definitely like every time I go out, I keep like a high strange journal. So anytime I do any kind of even like deep research just at home, like, on my computer, or I go out and look at stuff, I'm always journaling about my experience.
That's smart too.
It's just a record, and it's more for myself than anyone. I'm not, it's just, a good way to keep notes and whatnot.
Steve, this has been a amazing, super fun chat about regional Nebraska and crazy Bigfoot stories, and it's been fun. I really hope there's a few listeners listening right now. They're like, I'm in Nebraska. I have this story. I should tell Steve.
Yeah,
How can they get in contact with you?
Right. Well, all my social media is under Bergmaster 5000. And just, if you do have a story, is weird or is small, I don't think there's any version of high strangeness that's small or insignificant. Even if it's just a wild synchronicity that opened up a new way of thinking or a new line of research for you, I want to hear about it. And I'm also, if you want to do your own research in Nebraska and you don't know where to begin, I am happy to give you a couple places to start. And then as long as you share the information with me, let's make this a symbiotic thing. So I do believe in the community. A rising tide lifts all ships, my friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I will have all that info in the show notes. Thank you so much for hanging out today, Steve.
Thanks for having me. True honor. So much fun, man.
If you'd like to hear an extra 30 minutes with Steve and hear us chat about things such as humanoid cases of Nebraska, Skinwalker Ranch, Dogman sightings in Nebraska, and portal activity in Otoe County, please consider becoming a supporting member of Bigfoot Society by going over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter you'd like to share, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for listening to Bigfoot Society.